Hello everyone. Thank you for joining. In this video, we'll discuss the evaluation criteria used to assess partner sales engineers in the context of API security. We have a few sections that we would like to make sure partners know how to qualify: run discovery, pitch, demo, and prepare for a POC. In the qualification section, we ensure that partner pre-sales inquire whether any API security or inventory projects have been initiated within the company, whether driven by a CISO mandate or other initiatives, so we can understand the priority and significance of this effort. Additionally, it's important to identify the company's industry, such as financial services, which typically face stricter compliance standards and regulations. This context helps shape the qualification process. We also want the partner to map out key decision makers or budget owners, determine whether there is an existing budget or if one is expected to be allocated, and understand the timeline for that allocation. These are fundamental qualification questions we expect the partner to address. In discovery, it's really important to check and ask the customer about any pain points around API security and to try and map them to our 4 pillars. So later on, if we decide to move to a proof of concept, then we can map the success criteria and the customer's pain points to our 4 pillars of discovery, posture, runtime, and testing. In terms of architecture, this will really help us later on to understand which integration should we choose. If the customer is using any API gateways, cloud providers, and if so, which ones? If they use more than one cloud provider, we would like to know about it. Any communication platforms they use, like Slack, Jira, ServiceNow, any SIM or source system that are being used like Splunk, QRadar, Microsoft Sentinel, and where does TLS termination happen for API traffic? So it can be at the CDN level, like if they use Akamai or Cloudflare, it can be in the web application firewall like Imperva, it can be the load balancer like F5 or the API gateway like Kong, Apigee, or AWS API gateway. It will also help us to know if they have any public-facing API catalog or developer portal, so we can have a look at their API and see whether they pass any PII data or account ID and what's the authentication methods that are being used, so we will be smarter when we do the pitch and demo. When we talk on the pitch, we are using the Akamai API Security Pitch Deck. First, it would be really important to share why API security is important. Recent data breaches in the news may be relevant to their specific industry. And also, we recently had the API Security Impact Study of 2024 report with some statistics, and this would help to get an idea whether they relate to the stats. They also have the same problems and challenges, so it will help us get on the same page together. Then, pain points map to the 4 pillars, the slide with all the questions that we ask by security professionals. And prospects don't really have a good answers to how many APIs do they have. What kind of data is flowing through their APIs? If they have any posture issues, can they detect and mitigate any OWASP API top 10 issues in runtime, and more? Do they have any scanning or testing security, API security testing solution tools for their API developers earlier in the software development lifecycle? And then we drill down into the 4 pillars. So starting with discovery. We have the capability to have a centralized repository and inventory for all their APIs across multiple traffic sources, whether it's a CDN, WAF, API gateway, cloud provider, all in one repository, which is the Akamai API Security Platform. We do automated data type classification. We learn the authentication methods. We develop risk score for each API endpoint based on multiple factors, like the operation that's being used, sensitive data, if flowing through their endpoint, whether they have authentication or not, whether we detected any findings or runtime issues in the endpoint, it will impact the risk score, which will help them focus on the highest risk endpoints. And the fact that we create automatically open API spec for their documentation, which can be compared to existing open API spec or be used by developers for documentation. Moving on to the posture pillar, which is more about vulnerabilities or misconfigurations in API design. It doesn't necessarily mean that someone is actively attacking them using these vulnerabilities, but they might be attacked because they have these vulnerabilities. So they should fix them now in order to reduce the attack surface. We always try to give an example like sensitive data is passed in an unauthenticated endpoint, which means that anyone can access this sensitive data. So either an authentication method should be added to the endpoint or the sensitive data type should be removed from the endpoint. This can be passed to the developers using Slack or Jira or ServiceNow automatically using our posture policies. Runtime security means that it's all about our machine learning-based algorithms that learn the normal behavior of the users interacting with the API endpoint and building this baseline of normal behavior. We can detect API abuse or behavior anomaly that is not according to the baseline. So we detect an alert on it, and the customer can also apply prevention either manually or automatically for certain attacks, anomalies, types, or severity levels. The fourth pillar is all about active testing, which means that developers can run scans earlier in the software development lifecycle in order to detect and mitigate issues before the code hits into production. So they can run the scans ad hoc manually or automatically every day. They can integrate into their CI/CD pipeline, so every time they release a new version, we can run a scan automatically, and if there are any high or critical severity issues discovered, then the developer will have to fix it before it goes to production. Additional aspects during the pitch deck is the platform architecture should be explained. It's not in line, it's out of band. There is no impact on performance or availability of the production traffic, the application, the APIs. We have different types of integrations like traffic source, workflow integrations, CI/CD integrations. We want to highlight the Akamai native connector as a highly preferred traffic source integration, especially for proof of concepts. As bonus points, you can mention the partnerships we have with Opero, with the code to runtime component, and also Zoplo, which is an API gateway we partner with. In terms of deployment modes, we have three: the SaaS, hybrid, and on-prem. SaaS and hybrid are more preferred and highly recommended. The on-premise is less recommended because the customer needs to maintain all the components. We only have long-term support or LTS versions that the customer can upgrade, so they miss any minor improvements in the releases that we release. It is important to highlight all the components like the traffic source, the engine, the backend, and the UI during the deployment slide. Moving on to the demo. We want to cover all the four pillars, or at least the ones that make a difference to the customer. So if the customer's main pain points and use case is around inventory and posture, that's where we would like to focus most of our time during the demo. So starting from the discovery and inventory, we want to show the Stats tab, explaining about the host, what is an API endpoint in our definition, showing that we can detect multiple types of APIs like REST, GraphQL, XML, etc. We show we can click on any data type and redirect to the APIs tab, filtered only for the endpoints that contain this data type in the request or in the response. We want to show that we automatically learn the authentication methods and can filter and sort based on authentication methods. Then in the APIs tab, you can show the out-of-the-box views like unauthenticated APIs or API with PII data or PCI data. Then all the columns that can be added to specific views, you can filter, you can sort, you can group by host, and so on. The Changes tab. It's all about new APIs, new authentication discovered, new headers being detected. You would like to explain about out-of-the-box data types versus custom data types that can be created using regular expressions by the field name, field value, and then you can also mark them as sensitive, forbidden, add tags like PII, PCI, HIPAA, and enable obfuscation for sensitive data. You can explain how to create data policies based on data types. For example, you would like to be notified every time a specific data type like account IDs exists in the API requests. You can create a data policy based on this criteria. Moving on to the posture component, where you want to show that the existing posture findings group by severity, group by type, and sort from the highest to lowest severity. Show one or two examples like the sensitive data is shared in an unauthenticated API, and then you click on the finding, and then you show the three sections we have: what happened, why that's a problem, what you should do about it, click on the evidence, talk about obfuscation, show the highlighted sections that trigger this finding, and how we can share this with other teams using Slack or Jira integrations. That's the posture part. In the runtime section, you go to the incidents view and the attackers view. In the incidents view, you can group by severity and types, sort by severity, explain the difference between posture and runtime issues. We have a predefined view of BOLA, so you need to select the time frame of the last year and then change the view to the BOLA view and then click on the last item and explain what is this issue all about. This is the user that is authenticated, and he's trying to get the vehicle location based on the vehicle ID and clicking on few requests and showing that the user mjones@fake.com is always the same, but the responses are with different vehicles' locations. So the user is authenticated, but the authorization is broken since one user can access other users' information, which is not good. In the attacker's view, you can show the different filter capabilities by confidence score, incident result, if it's attempted, inconclusive, or succeeded, show some information about the attacker IP reputation, ASN, geographic location, and how the block IP works with prevention integration, and mention that we can also have prevention integration with an API gateway that's enforcing the prevention. The last pillar is the active testing. Explain only if this is something that's interesting for the customer because this is more developer focused. Shift left focus, but you can share how to create an application. What's the process so the developer will need to upload a Swagger or a Postman collection, set up the authentication method, provide a couple of test users to test BOLA, for example, and then select the test profile. For example, a REST API shouldn't select the GraphQL tests because they are not relevant. And then you can explain how we run scans either ad hoc or automatically with the CI/CD integration. Click on one scan, show some results, show the evidence, and talk a little bit about the CI/CD integration. Show it in GitHub and GitLab and all the other CI/CDs that we can integrate with. So this is the active testing component. In the reports, we usually like to show the executive report. In the Security Posture Findings tab, scrolling down a bit, and show the detected versus closed report. Explain how this can be used as a KPI in the long term. We keep detecting issues, and the customer keeps fixing the issues that were detected. We detect more since new APIs are being released with new issues, and they are being fixed, and then the two lines should be closer together. We have added the compliance dashboard, which can also be used for KPI to show what is the current posture compared to the specific compliance standard like GDPR, PCI, MITRE, etc. After the demo, if you think this is a good candidate for a proof of concept, it would be helpful if you make some scoping about the environment. We need to have production API traffic, so explaining to the customer because the machine learning algorithm will learn the baseline of normal behavior, we will probably detect more issues for production traffic. It doesn't have to be the most critical production environment. It can be a smaller hostname or an application that can be used for the POC. Then we should scope the traffic source integration. If it's the Akamai native connector, which is highly recommended, which host names should be in scope, and the teams that should be engaged during the POC. Involve the networking team if we need to open firewall rules for an API gateway or a WAF integration. Ensure we have the team that is responsible, for example, for Apigee, MuleSoft, or Kong. So we need to make some changes in the Kong API gateway in order to pass the API traffic to the platform. The relevant team is here to help. Identify the POC champion or the people that will be available during the POC and make sure they have the attention and the resource to meet with us once a week during a period of 3 to 4 weeks. If there are any SOC or SIM teams that would like to get the posture findings or the runtime incidents, we should map them also and make sure they are engaged as well. We hope you'll find this structured evaluation criteria beneficial. To ensure your success as trusted advisor, you should be fluent and comfortable with this criteria, and that will help us to have more partners enabled. Partners can be independent, and we can close more business together. Thank you for watching.